Kai had always felt the pull of compassion deep in his heart. It was one of the reasons he had become a volunteer with Earth's emergency medical services. The world was full of suffering, and he couldn't stand by and do nothing. His days were spent in the most war-torn areas, providing first aid and comfort to those in need. No matter the race, no matter the background, to him, a person in pain was a person to be cared for. It was during one of these missions that he found her. A routine trip to a crash site in the wastelands turned into something neither Kai nor the world could have predicted. His team had been told to investigate a mysterious alien craft that had landed far from any major cities. At first, they thought it was a simple mechanical failure, a broken-down ship. But when they arrived, they found wreckage, smoke, and a presence, an alien presence. Kai had always heard stories of the war with the alien invaders, but nothing prepared him for this moment. The ship had clearly been in a crash landing, and the alien survival was nothing short of miraculous. She lay near the wreckage, barely breathing. Kai's heart pounded in his chest as he sprinted to her side, his fellow volunteers right behind him. Her skin was pale, almost silver in the light, and covered in bruises and burns. She was wearing armor, but it was scorched and torn. As he knelt beside her, he could see the blood, dark and alien, pooling around her. Despite the fact that she was clearly not human, Kai couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. This being was alive, and she needed help. "Help me, please," Kai muttered as he checked her pulse. It was weak, but there. One of his fellow medics, Lena, began setting up the necessary equipment for a quick triage. "She's not human, Kai," Lena said, staring at the alien's features in awe. "I know," Kai replied, his voice strained. He didn't need to be reminded, but she's still a living being, and she needs help. They quickly set to work, stabilizing her, and Kai couldn't help but notice the warrior-like quality in her features. She wasn't just a stranded traveler. She was someone who had fought battles, someone who had seen war. Yet here she was, vulnerable and needing aid. After stabilizing her condition, Kai and Lena carefully moved her to the makeshift camp they set up nearby. As they worked, Kai couldn't stop thinking about her. Despite the fear and awe he felt at the sight of an alien, something else had taken root in his chest, a strange protectiveness. Jara, as she later introduced herself, regained consciousness hours later. Her eyes flickered open, but the pain was evident. Kai had set up a temporary bedroll for her, and Lena had given her some pain medication. Jara's eyes met his, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence between them. She looked at him, suspicion and confusion written across her features. She was clearly trying to assess him, just as he was trying to understand her. Kai took a deep breath, realizing that this was no ordinary encounter. She was an alien, a warrior, no less, but she was also a person in pain, just like any other. "I thank you," Jara whispered, her voice hoarse. "I did not expect kindness from humans." Kai's heart skipped a beat at the sound of her words. He couldn't help but smile, his voice gentle as he replied, "Everyone deserves kindness, no matter who they are." Jara's gaze softened ever so slightly, but she quickly masked it with a cold expression. "I am not a being that requires kindness. I only require survival." Her voice was low and strong, carrying the weight of someone who had known nothing but hardship. Kai didn't take offense. Survival is important, but even warriors need help sometimes. Her eyes flickered at that, but she said nothing more. The tension in the air was thick, and Kai could feel the weight of her words, the years of battles, and the pain she carried in her soul. He could see that she wasn't just wounded physically. There was something deeper in her that had been broken. Perhaps it was the same thing that drove her to fight. Whatever it was, he knew that she wasn't just a soldier. In the hours that followed, Kai and Jara hardly exchanged words, but the silence between them was never uncomfortable. There was a mutual understanding that settled in their unspoken connection, a bond that was starting to form even in the midst of this strange and dangerous situation. Kai didn't know it yet, but this act of kindness, of feeding and caring for an alien warrior, would change everything for him. He had no idea that this woman, this warrior, was about to become more than just a survivor of a crash. She would become someone he could never forget. As the night wore on, Jared drifted in and out of sleep. Kai remained nearby, keeping watch. There was something about her presence that intrigued him, and something about her eyes that felt both alien and human at the same time. Maybe it was the way she seemed to carry the weight of an entire galaxy's troubles on her shoulders. He sat by her side, silently wondering what would happen next, knowing that he had already stepped into something far larger than himself. The future was uncertain, but for now, there was peace in knowing he had made the right choice in helping her. Little did he know that this simple act of compassion was the beginning of a story neither of them could have predicted. And so, as Jara slept, her body slowly healing under the care of a human who didn't fully understand the magnitude of what he had done, Kai watched the stars above. The universe, vast and unpredictable, was about to reveal a path that neither of them could have ever imagined. The days that followed the crash were full of quiet, unspoken moments. Kai had expected this to be just another rescue mission, a brief encounter where he'd help the injured and send them on their way. But Jara, the alien warrior, was no ordinary patient. She was a survivor, and beneath her stoic exterior, there was something that Kai couldn't ignore. Despite her fierce independence and her distant demeanor, there was a subtle shift in her behavior toward him. Jara, once cold and reserved, had started to show small signs of appreciation. Every time Kai helped her, whether by bringing her water or checking her wounds, she would give him a brief nod of acknowledgement. There was no warmth in her expressions, but Kai could sense that she was at least grateful. And that, in itself, was progress. Lena, the medic who had worked alongside Kai, had been keeping an eye on Jara's recovery. But even she couldn't help but notice the odd bond forming between the two. "You're doing more than just healing her wounds, Kai," Lena commented one morning as she cleaned medical supplies. "There's something happening between you two." Kai turned to face her, slightly caught off guard. "What do you mean?" Lena glanced at Jara, who was sitting quietly on the other side of their camp, her eyes scanning the horizon. "I mean, you've done this for plenty of people, Kai. You've helped countless injured soldiers. But there's something different about the way you're looking at her." Kai sighed, running a hand through his hair. "She's not just another soldier, Lena. There's something in her eyes, something beyond the warrior she's trying to show the world." Lena raised an eyebrow, but said nothing more. She was a practical woman, and the complexities of human emotions had never been her area of expertise. But she could see the subtle way Kai and Jara had begun to interact. Kai's concern for her was different than the way he'd shown compassion to others, and Jara, for all her strength, seemed to be softening around him. One evening, after the sun had set and the campfire crackled with warmth, Kai approached Jara. She was sitting apart from the group, staring up at the sky. He hesitated for a moment before taking a seat beside her. "Are you feeling better?" Kai asked, his voice gentle. Jara turned her head slowly, her alien eyes meeting his. "I am healing, yes, but I do not need your pity." Kai held up his hands in defense. "I'm not offering pity. I'm just asking if you're all right." Jara's gaze lingered on him for a long moment. "You are strange, human. I do not understand your kindness. Why help me?" Kai shrugged, looking into the flames. "I've always believed that people, no matter where they come from, should help each other. The world is full of pain, but if we don't try to ease it, then what's the point of living?" Jara's eyes softened ever so slightly, and for the first time since they'd met, there was a hint of vulnerability in her voice. "I have never known a life without war. It is all I have ever known. To see someone care for me, it confuses me." Kai smiled, his eyes glinting with a warmth that seemed to break through the barriers between them. "I get it. I think you've been alone for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to let someone in." Jara turned her head away, staring into the distance. "I am not accustomed to being vulnerable." Kai looked at her carefully. There was a strength in her, but also something deep within her that yearned for connection. It was a side she'd buried beneath her warrior persona, a side she wasn't ready to face. Yet, with Kai's quiet understanding, she felt it surfacing. A small part of her was learning to trust. The next morning, Kai found Jara at the edge of the camp, practicing with a weapon she had scavenged from the wreckage. Her movements were fluid and precise, a dance of deadly skill. Watching her, Kai couldn't help but feel a deep respect for her, not just as a warrior, but as a person. "Is it always like this for you?" he asked from behind her, careful not to startle her. She stopped mid-motion, turning to face him. "Like what?" "Always preparing for the next fight, always ready for battle." Jara sighed, her posture shifting, as if she were weighed down by the burden of her past. "For me, there has always been a war. I know nothing else." Kai nodded, understanding. "You've been fighting for so long that you've forgotten what it's like to live for something else." Jara didn't answer, but the way she lowered her weapon told him she was beginning to consider his words. For the first time, Kai saw a flicker of something more than just a soldier in her eyes, something softer, something human. Later that afternoon, Jara approached Kai as he was preparing some food. She stood silently behind him for a moment before speaking. "I never thanked you," she said, her voice softer than usual. "For what you did." Kai turned, surprised. "You don't need to thank me. I'm just doing what anyone would do." Jara shook her head. "No, not everyone would. You risked your life to help me. You saved me when I would have let myself die." Kai shrugged again, a little uncomfortable with the praise. "It's what I do. Besides, I don't believe anyone should die alone if they don't have to." Jara's eyes lingered on him for a moment longer than necessary. "Then I suppose I owe you a debt." Kai smiled. "You don't owe me anything. But if you ever feel like you want to repay me, you can start by just being here. Just talk to me. I know you've been through a lot, but you don't have to do it alone anymore." Jara didn't reply right away, but there was a slight change in her demeanor. She stayed with him, helping him with the food and working alongside him as they continued their quiet days in the camp. Though she didn't say much, Kai could sense that the walls she had built around herself were slowly beginning to crumble. Their bond, fragile and unspoken, grew stronger with each passing day. Jara wasn't just the warrior she had once believed herself to be. She was something more, something Kai was beginning to understand. And as they spent more time together, Kai realized that the act of kindness he had offered her in the beginning was only the beginning of something much larger. The days in the quiet camp had passed slowly, with each one seeming to bring Kai and Jara closer. She had begun to open up to him in small ways. Though her words were few, her actions spoke volumes. Every time they worked together, whether it was setting up camp or preparing meals, Jara's presence was a comforting constant. Her warrior instincts were still evident, but she had let her guard down just enough to allow him to see the woman beneath the armor. Kai, on the other hand, had become more than just her caretaker. He had become a steady, reliable presence in her life, a presence that was slowly replacing the weight of her solitude. She wasn't used to it, this bond, this feeling of being cared for, but she was learning to accept it. It wasn't until one late afternoon, when the sound of distant engines roared through the air, that their fragile peace was shattered. Kai had been gathering firewood when the noise first caught his attention. It wasn't just a passing sound. It was the unmistakable hum of spacecraft engines. His heart raced as he turned toward Jara, who had already moved to a higher vantage point. She was looking into the sky, her face grim, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the approaching threat. "Jara, what is it?" Kai asked, his voice thick with concern. He had come to trust her instincts over the past few weeks, and the way she stood there, alert, poised, told him that something serious was happening. Jara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached for the weapon she had been training with and adjusted her stance. Her body was taut with readiness. "They are coming for me," she said quietly, her voice a low growl. "What do you mean, they? Who are they?" Her eyes locked with his, the weight of her words sinking into Kai's chest like a stone. "They are from my world, the ones who want me back." Kai's mind raced. He had known Jara was from another galaxy, but he had no idea that there were people, or rather, enemies, looking for her. The realization hit him hard. She wasn't just some stranded survivor. She was part of a larger conflict, one far beyond anything he had ever imagined. A sudden blast of air rushed past them as the ships grew closer, and the tension in the air became unbearable. Jara didn't hesitate. She moved quickly, her warrior instincts taking over as she grabbed her weapon and began to prepare for what was coming. Kai, feeling both fear and the urge to protect her, followed closely behind. "They'll want me alive," Jara continued, her voice steady despite the looming danger. "But they won't hesitate to destroy anyone who stands in their way." "Then we'll stop them together," Kai said, his voice filled with determination. Zara glanced at him, surprised by the firmness in his tone. She didn't respond right away, instead turning her focus to the enemy ships approaching. "You should leave. I'll handle this." Kai shook his head. "I'm not going anywhere without you. You've been there for me, Jara. Now I'll be here for you." She paused, her gaze softening for just a fraction of a second. It was a fleeting moment, but it was enough. "You are foolish, human," she muttered, her voice low and conflicted. But she didn't push him away. Instead, she positioned herself beside him, ready to face whatever was coming. The sound of the engines grew louder, and within moments, the ships descended from the sky. Jara moved quickly, positioning herself behind a large rock, while Kai stayed low, trying to remain out of sight. His heart pounded in his chest as he looked at the approaching ships. They were sleek and advanced, unlike anything he had ever seen before. The technology was far beyond human capabilities. The ships landed with a soft thud, and a group of armed figures emerged from the hatch. They were taller than humans, with armor that glinted under the setting sun. Their movements were synchronized, military precision at its finest. Jara's eyes narrowed, and she stepped out from her hiding place, her weapon raised. She didn't wait for them to speak. She had already made her decision. "I am not going with you," she declared, her voice strong and clear. The leader of the group, a tall figure with a mask that covered his face, stepped forward. "You have no choice, Jara. Your presence is required. The war cannot continue without you." Jara shook her head. "I will not fight your war any longer." Kai, watching from his position, felt a mix of admiration and concern for Jara. She was standing firm, unwilling to back down, but the numbers were against them. The enemy was strong, and there was no way they could win without help. Just then, one of the soldiers caught sight of Kai, his position now compromised. A soldier raised his weapon, pointing it directly at him. "You're the one who's been helping her, aren't you? The human who thinks he can stand in the way of the galaxy's fate." Jara reacted instantly. Without thinking, she lunged forward, knocking the soldier off balance and taking the weapon from his hand in one smooth motion. She didn't hesitate. She aimed the weapon at the approaching group of soldiers, her voice unwavering. "You will not harm him. If you want me, you'll have to go through me first." The leader of the group raised a hand, signaling his troops to hold their ground. "You're making a grave mistake, Jara. We have orders." Jara's eyes flashed with defiance. "I'm done following orders." A tense silence fell between them, broken only by the sounds of the wind and the distant hum of the ships. For a long moment, no one moved. And then, to everyone's surprise, Kai stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I don't know who you are," Kai said, his voice steady, "but I know one thing for sure. Jara doesn't belong to you. She's not your tool, your weapon, or your prisoner." The leader looked at him, seemingly amused. "And what makes you think you can speak for her, human?" Kai's gaze never wavered. "Because she's more than just a soldier. She's someone worth fighting for, and I'm not going to let you take her from me." Jera's gaze met Kai's for the briefest of moments, a look of surprise flashing in her eyes. She didn't know why, but at that moment, she knew something was changing between them. This human had risked everything for her. No one had ever done that before, not even her own people. The standoff between Kai, Jera, and the enemy soldiers had stretched on, the air thick with tension. The leader of the group, his masked face unreadable, studied Kai closely, as if weighing whether the human was truly a threat. The sound of wind against the barren land was the only noise that broke the silence, adding to the suspense that hung in the air. Jera stood firm, her weapon trained on the soldiers. She was a force to be reckoned with, every inch the warrior. Kai, standing beside her, felt a mixture of admiration and anxiety. He knew they were outmatched. She had already told him that these soldiers were from her world, and it was clear that their mission wasn't just about capturing Jera. It was about eliminating anyone who got in their way. The leader spoke first, his voice cold and calm. "Ending. This is your last chance, Jera. Come with us peacefully, and we will ensure your safety. Resist, and there will be consequences for both of you." Jera's eyes narrowed. "I will never return to your war. I am done being a weapon for your people." Kai glanced at her, a sense of determination rising in his chest. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for something far more important. The last shred of hope she had for a life beyond battle was in her grasp, and he would do everything in his power to help her keep it. Before anyone could react, Jera moved. With the grace and speed of a predator, she darted toward the enemy leader, her weapon aimed at his chest. In the blink of an eye, she knocked his weapon away, disarming him with a swift motion. The soldiers, momentarily stunned by her sudden action, hesitated. "Go," Jera shouted at Kai, her voice sharp and commanding. "Now." Without thinking, Kai followed her command, racing to a nearby ridge where he could get a better vantage point. His heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He had never imagined he would be in a situation like this, standing beside an alien warrior, running for their lives. But there was no turning back now. He had already made the decision to stand by her, no matter what. As Jera continued to engage the enemy soldiers, Kai spotted something in the distance. Another ship, this one far larger than the ones that had just landed. It looked like a transport ship with the ability to carry many people. It wasn't the perfect solution, but it was their best chance at escape. "Jera," Kai called, waving toward the distant ship. "We need to go. Now." Jera, hearing the urgency in his voice, turned toward him. The soldiers were recovering from their initial shock and regrouping. They would be back on their feet soon, and Jera knew they didn't have much time. She nodded. "Follow me." With a swift motion, she bounded toward the transport ship, her speed unmatched. Kai followed, his legs pumping with the effort to keep up. The enemy soldiers were beginning to pursue, their weapons raised as they called out in alien tongues, their voices sharp and angry. The transport ship was still a considerable distance away, but Jera's movements were precise. She weaved through the rocky terrain with ease, her every step calculated to ensure their escape. Kai, on the other hand, struggled to keep up, but the thought of Jera being caught drove him forward. As they neared the ship, the enemy soldiers fired a warning shot. The laser blast struck the ground just in front of them, sending up a shower of rocks and dust. Kai stumbled, his heart racing as the realization hit him. They were closing in fast. Jera's eyes narrowed, her face set in a determined expression. "Keep moving," she shouted. Kai didn't need to be told twice. He pushed forward, his legs burning from the effort. The ship was within reach, but the soldiers were gaining on them. He could hear their heavy footsteps behind him, the sound of weapons being charged, ready for a fight. Just as Jera reached the ship's entrance, a loud explosion erupted from behind them. Kai turned his head just in time to see a massive blast of energy erupting from one of the enemy ships. The explosion sent shockwaves through the ground, and Kai was knocked off his feet, tumbling forward. Jara, however, didn't hesitate. She reached out a hand and grabbed his arm, pulling him up with surprising strength. "Get inside," she ordered, urgency lacing her voice. Kai didn't argue. He scrambled toward the ship, Jara right behind him. As they both entered the ship, the door slammed shut behind them with a heavy thud. The ship's engines roared to life, and within moments, they were ascending into the sky, leaving the chaos below. Inside the ship, the two of them collapsed to the floor, their chests heaving with exhaustion. Kai could hardly believe what had just happened. They had escaped, but just barely. His mind raced with questions, but Jara's steady gaze silenced him. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice soft despite the harshness of their escape. Kai nodded, still catching his breath. "I'm fine. But that was too close." Zara allowed herself a brief moment of relief, her face softening slightly. "We've made it," she said quietly, her eyes meeting his. As the ship ascended into the unknown, Kai couldn't help but wonder what awaited them. They had escaped the immediate danger, but there was so much more ahead. Jara's past, the enemies pursuing her, and the larger conflict that loomed over both of them. It was all so much more than Kai had ever imagined when he first met her. But in that moment, as the stars stretched out before them, Kai knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to back down. He had made a promise to her, and he would do whatever it took to keep it. And Jara, the alien warrior who had once believed she was destined for nothing but war, began to realize that she was not alone anymore. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something more. The escape was only the beginning. As the transport ship soared through the sky, leaving behind the wreckage of their battle, Kai and Jara sat in silence, the weight of the situation settling in. The ship's hum filled the air, a constant reminder that they were no longer on Earth, no longer in the safety of their home planet. Instead, they were heading into the unknown, where Jara's past and the dangers it held were waiting for them. Jara stood near the ship's large window, gazing out at the stars. Her posture was tense, as though every movement she made was calculated, every thought focused on the next possible threat. Kai, still adjusting to the shock of everything that had just happened, leaned against the wall, trying to catch his breath and make sense of it all. "This isn't over, is it?" Kai finally asked, his voice breaking the silence. Jara didn't turn to face him immediately, but she nodded slowly. "No, it's far from over," she said, her voice steady but carrying an edge of sadness. "The ones who came after me were just a small part of something much bigger. My people. They will not stop until they have me back, and they will destroy anyone who gets in their way." Kai felt a chill run through him. He had known that the enemy soldiers were dangerous, but hearing Jara speak about them in such a detached, almost resigned tone made him realize just how deep the conflict went. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about a war that spanned across galaxies, a war in which Jara was an unwilling player. He stood up and moved toward her. "What happens now? What do we do?" Jara's gaze softened slightly as she looked at him. She had been preparing herself for this moment. Ever since the crash, ever since she had realized that she was no longer in control of her fate. But now, standing next to Kai, something inside her had changed. He wasn't like the others. He wasn't afraid of her, nor did he see her as just a weapon to be used in a galactic war. He had stood by her side when it mattered most, and now there was a bond between them that was impossible to ignore. "There is a place," Jara began, her voice quieter now. "A planet where I can find refuge, where I might be able to hide from them for a time. It's not much, but it's the only hope we have right now." Kai listened intently. "Where is this place?" "It's called Arian," Jara said, her eyes distant as she spoke of it. "A planet far from my people's reach. It's neutral territory, a place where no one can touch us." The idea of a neutral planet was something Kai had never considered. His world was so small, so limited in scope, that the thought of intergalactic politics and neutral territories seemed like something out of a storybook. But Jara's seriousness told him that this wasn't some fantasy. This was their only chance. "How long will it take us to get there?" Kai asked, feeling the urgency of the situation. "At this speed, we should be there within a few days," Jara replied. "But we'll need to stay off the radar. If my enemies find out where we're going, it won't matter how far we've run. We'll be hunted down." Kai nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. "Then we'll keep our heads down. We'll lay low until we get there." Jara turned to face him fully now, her eyes locking with his. "You're not like the others, Kai. I don't understand why you're helping me, why you're willing to risk so much. But I appreciate it." Kai gave her a small smile, though it was tinged with sadness. "I've always believed that people should help each other. I don't need to understand everything. I just know that you're not alone in this anymore. I'm here with you, and we'll figure this out together." Jara studied him for a moment, as if weighing his words, and then without a word she nodded. It wasn't much, but it was enough for Kai to know that, in her own way, she trusted him. Days passed, and the journey to Arion was filled with quiet moments of contemplation. The ship's interior was small but comfortable enough for them to survive the long trip. They spent most of their time in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, but occasionally exchanging words about the future, about what lay ahead. During one of their meals, Kai spoke up again. "Jara, what exactly do you want from this? I mean, after we get to Arion, what's your plan?" Jara paused, the question hanging in the air. She had never really thought about her future beyond survival. For so long, her only focus had been the war, the mission, and the constant struggle. But now, with Kai beside her, she realized that there could be more. There could be a life beyond the battlefield, something she had never allowed herself to hope for. "I don't know," she admitted, looking down at her food. "For so long, I've been a soldier. I've been fighting, and there was no time to think beyond that. But now, with everything that's happened, I don't know what to do anymore." Kai, who had been watching her closely, spoke gently. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. We're just taking it one step at a time. We get to Arion, we figure out what's next. But the most important thing is that you're not fighting alone anymore." Jara met his eyes then, and for the first time since he had met her, she allowed herself to feel something she hadn't in a long time. Hope. "You're right," she said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I've never had that before. Someone to fight alongside me, someone who believes in something more than just survival." Kai returned her smile, his heart lighter than it had been in days. "Well, now you do." The journey to Arion was slow but steady. Each day that passed brought them closer to the distant planet. But the tension never eased. Kai and Jara knew that even once they reached their destination, the war she was running from wouldn't simply fade away. The enemy soldiers who had pursued her were relentless, and no place would be truly safe unless they fought back. Despite the growing tension, Jara began to open up more. With each passing day, the walls she had built around herself crumbled just a little bit more. Kai noticed the small changes, how she smiled more, even if it was brief, or how she started asking him about Earth and its people, something she had never done before. They talked about their pasts, about what had brought them here, and what they each wanted from the future. But the reality was always there, looming just beneath the surface. Jara's people were still after her, and the clock was ticking. The thought of them finding her before she reached safety made her anxious, but she hid it well. It wasn't just the soldiers who were the problem, though. She had heard whispers in her people's hierarchy, rumors that some factions were willing to go to extreme lengths to bring her back, not just as a soldier, but as someone who had the power to change the course of the war. Kai wasn't blind to the danger she was in, and the closer they got to Arion, the more determined he became to protect her. He had made a promise to stand by her, and he wasn't about to break it. One evening, as the stars outside grew brighter, they sat together in the ship's cockpit, watching the endless expanse of space. Kai was staring out the window when he spoke. "Jara, once we get to Arian, what happens then? How do we keep you safe?" Jara didn't turn to him right away. Her eyes were fixed on the distant stars, her expression thoughtful. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Arian is supposed to be a neutral place. But even there, I'll be vulnerable. My enemies will stop at nothing to find me. They'll search every corner of this galaxy if they have to." Kai nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. He had known this wasn't going to be easy, but hearing it from her made it feel even more real. He glanced at her, determination in his eyes. "Then we'll make them realize something. They can't just take you without a fight. And I'm not about to let them." Jara's gaze softened, her voice quiet. "You don't have to fight this battle, Kai. It's my fight, not yours." But Kai shook his head. "It's our fight now. You're not alone in this. I promised I'd help you, and I meant it." There was a long silence between them, and for a moment, Jara allowed herself to believe him. She had never truly known trust like this before. Not in her enemies, not in her people, and certainly not in anyone who wasn't part of the war. But Kai had proven himself over and over, and she could feel the sincerity in his words. Kai watched her from across the cockpit. He had seen her fight, seen her survive against impossible odds, but there was something different about her now. She seemed smaller, more vulnerable, despite her strength. He could see the war in her eyes, the memories of a life spent battling, both physically and emotionally. But there was also something new, a flicker of hope, something she hadn't shown before. She was letting herself imagine a future. "We're here," Kai said, his voice breaking through the silence. He knew she needed to hear that. She had been so focused on the fight, the survival, that she hadn't allowed herself to think about what came next. Jara turned toward him, her expression unreadable. "We're not safe yet, Kai," she replied, her voice steady. "I don't trust that we've left the past behind. I can feel it. They'll find me, eventually. And when they do, I don't know what will happen." Kai stood and moved toward her, his voice filled with conviction. "We're not running anymore. We made it here, and we'll fight to stay here if we have to. Together." Jara's gaze softened slightly, though she quickly masked it with a cool demeanor. "You don't understand," she said, shaking her head. "You're a human. You're not prepared for what my people are capable of. Their reach is far, and they don't stop. They'll come for me, and they'll come for you too." Kai didn't falter. He reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "I don't care about their reach, Jara. I care about you. I care about keeping you safe, no matter what it takes." Jara looked down at his hand, her chest tightening at the sincerity in his words. She had always been alone, forced to carry the weight of her past and her people's expectations. But now, for the first time, she felt like she wasn't alone. There was someone beside her who cared, someone who was willing to fight for her. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. Could she really let herself trust someone that much? She sighed, a deep, weary sound. "You don't know what you're asking of me." "I know," Kai said quietly, squeezing her shoulder gently. "But I'm not asking for anything from you, Jara. I'm just telling you that I'm not going anywhere." Jara's eyes met his, and for a moment, the weight of everything between them seemed to disappear. She could see the determination in his gaze, the unwavering promise he had made to her. It was a rare thing, a promise not made lightly. And as much as she tried to convince herself that she didn't need anyone, she couldn't deny the truth. She needed him, maybe more than she was willing to admit. "We need to land," Jara said, her voice breaking the moment. "We need to find somewhere to hide, and we need to do it fast." Kai nodded, not questioning her decision. He knew she was right. They couldn't waste time. The longer they stayed in the open, the more likely it was that Jera's enemies would track them down. The ship made its way toward a small, hidden landing zone in the rolling hills below. It was a quiet place, far from the bustling cities and military bases of Arian. Jera had chosen it for its isolation, a place where they could lay low and avoid detection. As the ship touched down, the engines hummed softly, and the familiar jolt of landing sent a ripple of tension through Kai's body. They had made it, but the real challenge was just beginning. Jera opened the hatch, stepping out first. The cool air of Arian's atmosphere felt different from the ship's recycled air. It was fresh, almost pure. Kai followed her, his boots crunching on the grassy ground beneath him. For a moment, everything felt peaceful. The hills stretched out before them, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. It was hard to believe that anything could disrupt the calm of this world. But Jera knew better. War was never far behind. "We need to get to the settlement," Jera said, her voice low and cautious. "It's not far from here. We'll find shelter and figure out our next move." Kai nodded, following her as she led the way. They walked in silence, the sound of their footsteps the only noise in the otherwise still world. Kai couldn't help but glance over at Jera. She was moving with purpose, but there was a weariness in her stride, a weight she couldn't shake off. The weight of her past. They'd reached the settlement just as the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon. It was a small, quiet place, tucked away from the larger cities of Arian. The people here lived simple lives, farming and trading with nearby communities. Jera spoke to the leader of the settlement, a middle-aged woman named Asha, who immediately offered them shelter. As they settled in for the night, Kai couldn't help but feel a small sense of relief. They were safe, for now. But Jera's words echoed in his mind. They hadn't escaped everything. They had just found a temporary refuge. But for the first time, he believed that they could make it. Together.